Apparently, chess is being solved, and it's not supposed to be possible. The game has more plausible moves than, or at least there's more games that can be played than there are atoms in the universe. But they're reverse engineering chess now. I had no idea that I was getting that to that level. So, how do you fix chess then? If we can solve chess, how do we fix it? It's always been left to the human conundrum. It's left to us, but now that we have computers and supercomputers, especially quantum computers, we need to create an infinite algorithm for chess. Why? Because we need an infinite potential for a game. What is with my eye? So there are various ways to go about doing that, and I'm only going to mention two of them that I've figured out. My ex-girlfriend and I, not that we were great, I mean, we're not great chess players, but for fun, we basically, like, once or twice a week or something, we'd get some sake and go, and something was just in my eye. We'd get sake and we would go and buy a new board game at the thrift store, and then we would just get drunk, play board games. It was a lot of fun. But chess, since we're not she wasn't particularly brilliant, and neither was I. It was more like trying to find fun in the game rather than just beating her. And I could just beat her over and over again. So what do? Well, one way that I considered was the queen can move like the knight as well. So it can, when the queen can move like the knight, just like it can move, it's unbelievably complicated. It's so overpowered. But the queen's already overpowered. It's just that when it can move like that, it's basically, at the end of the game, it becomes a stalemate because there are no outcomes, right? There are an infinite set of variables that can be played. So stalemates are the same way. If you just have like two kings or a king and a bishop, you have this issue as well. Another thing too was upgrading the king. I always liked the ability to take the king, and so the whole focal point then of the strategy of the game becomes not just leaving the king in castle or something in a defensive position. He can also become an attacking piece. But in endgames, that's when it really becomes emphasized, the need for the king to become an attacking piece. However, if you have something else, like upgrading the king to move like the knight, so basically, I look at the game like war, that if you take the king and it goes all the way across the field, say it steals a horse, now the king is a jouster, right? So the king can move like a horse as well. It can move in all those formats. And that too variably complicates, and it allows the king to become an attacking piece. Now, to say that maybe if you can go across the board and you can choose what the king becomes, like a pawn, but then it can still move like the king, that's another thing too. You have to play all these games. It overcomplicates it. Chess has been the way it is for so long. How are we going to make it, the same way it was up until now for the future? How are we going to make it still so good? And without just, because that's why I like the upgrading the king. That's such a small change rather than just making an impossible queen. The queen is so strong that if it can move like a horse, It's like impossible to trap. You can't do it. And basically, the queen ends up being so powerful that it takes the focus of the entire game. However, if you look at the king and you incorporate all the different strategies, it's not just trying to capture the king, it's then trying to also move the king across the board. And if you try to move the king across the board, that shuffles every fucking algorithm out there and it multiplies them. So every game that then has the original checkmate strategies and defense strategies are now multiplied by the exact same strategies for getting the king. So all those possible moves times possible moves times possible moves. I think that's the simplest way to make chess 2.0, as the guy mentioned, and it'd be the funnest. It gives the king something else to do, because the king's kind of dry. I think at this point, the king's a little dry, and it's great, but how much cooler would it be if you could take the king across the board and say, now I want to turn the king into a bishop? And so now you're incorporating strategies that have a king that can turn black and white, right? So it can switch back and forth. Or, it can, I don't know, whatever. It can switch if you want, or there's like a thing where it could castle and act like the queen. So then, per move, it might overcomplicate it at that point. That's just the foundation. It's something to consider.